Welcome to Forest Chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we're talking with Holly Taylor about being a mountaineer. Holly started with hikes along trails, had the opportunity to do the Kokoda Trail, and then found that there was quite a challenge in going higher and how high up can you go. And that took her into the mountains to the point where she was going to base camps and then onto the summit of mountains. Welcome to Forest Chat, Holly.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Great to have you here, Holly. Holly, you've had quite a journey getting along and doing a number of trails and hikes and then getting up to base camps. What are we talking about when we say you're a mountaineer?
The difference between hiking and mountaineering is the style in which you're climbing and traveling by. Hiking obviously is a lot on foot, just walking, whereas mountaineering starts to involve a lot more ice climbing, rock scrambling, usually the use of tools in regards to crampons and ice axes, ropes, and just the lack of oxygen that brings and the challenges.
So literally when you're looking at a picture of the landscape with mountains in it, there's usually an area above the trees that always looks very rocky and rough. Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. The last few climbs that I've done have been over 6,000 meters. So generally you'd find over 4,000 meters, there is no more living plant life up there, and it becomes more of an icy kind of desolate environment.
Must be terrific views though.
Yeah, there's nothing like it. It's just the most amazing sight in the world when you're up high. It's, something that you'll never forget, never leaves you.
Holly, are there any regulations that you need to worry about?
It depends on the country that you're climbing. A lot of the countries that you do climb in are third world countries. So some of the regulations are quite lax, but obviously safety is a pretty paramount because the mortality rate can be quite high in mountaineering, especially when you're doing high altitude mountaineering. Nepal is paramount when it comes to their regulations and standards and the training that the local people and guides have, as opposed to countries like Pakistan, where I most recently went, and it's a very new industry to that country and there is no regulation. So it's a country, I guess you go there knowing your own ability and skills and relying a bit more on yourself because they just don't have the regulation there to help in any way if something goes wrong.
There's a fair bit of community around mountaineering, I would imagine. So when you're going from a country like Nepal to somewhere like Pakistan, I imagine that there are people who've gone to Pakistan who know what goes on in Nepal and in some ways probably apply some of those standards across. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I feel like a lot of people that I met when I was in Pakistan that were mountaineering, they had all been to Nepal because Nepal is the mecca of climbing, essentially. It's quite evident in Pakistan that it's a long way off where Nepal is in that regard.
Because in Pakistan, they're not really in place. That the
No.
people have learnt in Nepal how it should
Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
and maybe automatically apply that how that should happen in Pakistan.
Yeah. So in Nepal, obviously they're the high gold standard when it comes to climbing. Their local people are very well trained in mountaineering. They're very well trained in how to pull off expeditions, how to pull off rescues. Their planning is absolutely exceptional. And then you go to somewhere like Pakistan, where it's very much in its infancy, and you'll notice a lot of the climbing porters and guides and everything, they're not trained. They don't actually have any mountain skills or mountaineering skills. and they have no regulations over there and no ability to rescue you or save you because the training just isn't there. So it's definitely something noticed, I guess, in with a lot of mountaineers that have climbed in Nepal when you go to Pakistan, that there's a long way for them to go. And I think their industry could be absolutely amazing if they could follow suit. But yeah, they're a very long way off that just yet.
It really depends then on where you go as to like how safe this is.
Yes, definitely. I think mountaineering can always be very dangerous. And I guess the height that I am looking to do in the future, and even the last climb, is already at that level where it's very dangerous. And so I think when choosing somewhere to go climbing, particularly at those heights, unless you're very experienced, you would probably always want to lean towards a country like Nepal, who has the gold standard of training and safety, as safe as you can be in that environment. And some of these other countries that are in the infancy of their mountaineering industry, they really are go at your own risk.
Is there any competition as such? Is there a governing body that operates worldwide around mountaineering?
Not so much in high altitude mountaineering. I know there's a lot of sport climbing in Europe through a lot of their smaller kind of 4,000-meter peaks. They do lots of quick summits, or it's more rock climbing, whereas high altitude mountaineering, apart from people trying to break world records with the most summits in a year or all those kind of things, it's very much more of a community than just trying to safely make it to the top and, more importantly, back down the bottom.
So there's no real organisation around it. It's basically, okay, there are some high peaks and there are challenges that people go after under their own steam.
Yeah, generally, I would say there's countries would have their mountaineering organisations or associations and whatnot, but generally it's more in the eye of safety and bringing those resources into those areas as opposed to sport or competition as such, particularly in the high altitude field.
How many people are typically out there doing the high altitude climbing?
It's still quite small, and even people talk about Everest being crowded and stuff like that, but they don't realize that there's still only 7,000 people that's ever summited Mount Everest. It's not a lot. And for example, last year when I went to Pakistan, I did have a look and saw the amount of climbing permits that were granted last year, and it was only 3,500 for the entire year for all international travellers. It's only quite a small portion of people doing this high altitude mountaineering. And I guess there's only a few countries where you can actually do it as well.
The Darling Range is not quite going to make it.
No, definitely not. As much as I'd like to try and make it a playground, it's not quite high enough.
I interviewed a gentleman who does organised sky running events, which is all about running, but getting the most elevation in the shortest amount of time. And even Australia didn't have enough elevation to be able to really put on a high level competition. We just don't have the elevation anywhere in the country to do it. It was
No, there's
quite
nowhere.
interesting.
Definitely. No,
So,
it's very flat here.
Holly, what does it take? Because we've already identified you're not going to be able to do much of it in WA or in Australia even. What does
Yeah.
it take you to be a mountaineer?
It's an interesting one because I guess the biggest thing that it takes in regards to training back home is just being as fit as you possibly can be. And for me, I am an ultra marathon runner, so it kind of ties in pretty perfectly with training for a mountain. And I do love trail ultra marathons and running as much elevation as I can, which ties in really well to the training. But in regards to things like actual mountaineering skills where you need ice skills to climb with crampons or an ice axe or rope skills, it's all kind of stuff that you need to learn up in the mountains. You not only have to have that fitness that you take over there, but when you're first starting out, you really do have to find the best mountain and guide that can teach you all those skills to prepare you for what you need to be able to do to get up these crazy high mountains.
You really can't learn those skills here. I know people who do bouldering style. They go out along the Darling Scarp where the rocks are exposed and they climb up those, and there's a good number of climbs. But you're talking about very different sorts of climbing, aren't you?
Yeah, it's always ice climbing at that height.
How do you go about gaining the skills you need to do that ice climbing?
The ice climbing is definitely something I feel can only be really learnt on the ice. It's something that is very hard to learn in Australia. You can certainly take rope skills over there from abseiling or rappelling or bouldering, but at the end of the day, it's probably still completely different and something that when you generally go and do your first kind of initial few climbs, it's something that you'll learn. You'll learn how to use your crampons, you'll learn how to use your ice axe, how to save yourself with either of those in the event that you need to, and you will need to at some stage. But generally, I have found every time I've gone up to the mountains and done a high altitude climb, you do a little bit of a refresher just as a bit of a teamwork kind of exercise on your rest days or your climatization days. You do a bit of a skills refresher.
You mentioned there about acclimatisation day. So, is there something that needs to happen to get you up to those altitudes?
Yeah, so when you're doing high altitude climbing, a lot of people ask me in particular, why don't you just go to the top? And it's because the level of oxygen every time you go up another 500 meters is less and less. And if you were to just go straight up, you would die or you would end up in a pretty unfortunate way. So, the way that we do high altitude climbing is we acclimatise. It's usually something that is done even from as low as 3,500 meters altitude. Every time you go up another 1,000 meters in altitude, you would spend a day or two at that altitude before progressing up. And with expedition style high altitude mountaineering, which is what I have been getting into, quite often we'll go from, say, base camp to camp one, and camp one back to base camp, then back up to camp one, and then you go to camp two, back to base camp. And then it's back and forth quite often between going up and down, sleeping at one height, going back down, going up 2 steps, back 1 step. And it's what can make those expeditions up one mountain last 4 to 6 weeks, because it's just a rotational system to make sure that your body has the best chance of survival and not getting into some pretty horrible medical situations as you get over 6,000 meters plus.
If you're in an aircraft, I can't remember the altitude, but you definitely end up with pilots on oxygen and all those sorts of things when you start to get the altitudes up nice and high.
Yeah, I know that helicopters can't fly to a lot of the higher camps. It's too high for a helicopter to fly. Even drones can't fly up there at a lot of the high altitudes because of the lack of pressure. So, yeah, it's always a danger in regards to altitude and how little pressure and oxygen there is, that even a helicopter pilot may need oxygen to pick you up in one of the higher camps if you need to be rescued.
That's just giving an indication of how high up you really are. That is a long way. When you think about 3.5 kilometres vertical and you're going above 4,000 up to 6,000, so that's 4 to 6 kilometres in vertical altitude. That's a long way.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that some of the bigger mountains in the world are kind of where a plane's cruising altitude is almost. It's quite scary, really.
Yes, but in a plane, you're inside a pressurized cylinder that's delivering all the oxygen at the right levels and all those sorts of things. Whereas you're outside effectively sleeping in a tent and your body's having to bear that load of less oxygen and that sort of thing. Do you also climb with oxygen?
I haven't climbed with oxygen yet. My last climb in Pakistan was a 7,000-meter peak. You would generally find probably up to 7,500 meters you can climb without oxygen. However, a lot of climbs from 7,000 plus, they do encourage oxygen use. But any summits over 8,000, you'd definitely be looking for oxygen unless you were trying to purposely summit that mountain without it. There's a lot of people that summit Everest with no oxygen, but it just takes a lot longer and the risk is obviously a lot higher that the damage can be irreversible, and if it goes wrong, it goes pretty wrong and they can't get you down from there if it does go wrong.
So those guys are all out there pushing the limits, aren't they?
Yeah, I
If
guess
they
that's
go,
the sport almost of it, some of pushing it to a new level, new extreme.
that sounds pretty intense to go and do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's intense enough as it is without having to add that level of extremity. But I guess for some of those people that have climbed Everest a few times or climbed a number of the 14 8,000-meter peaks, us as humans, we always want to go the next level and see what we can do. And as much as I'm probably never going to do an 8,000-meter climb without oxygen, I can see how people can get drawn to it and that never ending push to see where you can get.
Yes, there's always a push. We've heard what it takes, Holly, to be a mountaineer. We'll have a break now, and after the break, we'll look at what it means. We've heard what it takes, Holly, to be a mountaineer. Now, let's have a look at what it means. Holly, what does it mean to you, your family, or the community that you're able to be a mountaineer?
I think for me, it's something that I like to push for. I've always been someone that likes to push themselves to not necessarily be the best, but I guess be the best version or do the best that they can in whatever that is. And for me, it is mountaineering. I do love it. It's something that I just absolutely find so much peace in when I'm up there, which sounds quite strange to a lot of people because it might not be the nicest time and it can be quite hard in terms of lack of oxygen, lack of food. You might be sleeping on a glacier in a tent with not very much comfort. But for me, I always just find it a very peaceful kind of experience that I just can't wait for the next time that I'm going to be up there. I know also for myself, I was diagnosed with MS 2.5 years ago. So the idea that I might never be able to climb a mountain again was like terrifying for me. And it was actually the first thing I asked my neurologist when I got diagnosed if I'd ever be allowed to do that on my treatment and with my diagnosis. And much to my mum's disgust, who was sitting there, she said, yes, if you feel up to it, you can do whatever you like. And I guess in a lot of ways, it's probably changed my mum's perspective of it as well, or my family's perspective of it, because originally it was, and it still is very scary for them. I know that they don't sleep much when I go to a lot of these countries and climb these mountains. And I do feel horrible for putting them through that. But at the same time, I know that they know that I just love it. And I think they really love that I have that in my life, I think.
So it's great to have something in your life that you really enjoy and want to go and do.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to have something like mountaineering or to even have found it because it was such an interesting one to stumble into as an Australian to fall in love with mountaineering. But it definitely is something that I feel like when I'm not in the mountains, I'm always planning when I will be or how I will be. how I'm going to get there and how I'm going to make it work. And it just, yeah, it keeps you going. And there's always challenges in life, especially when you have MS. And for me, I always think, oh no, I've got to climb this mountain, or I've still got to do this one day. So I've got to keep up the good work and keep moving ahead.
So it's great that it gives you goals as well. You're always working towards something. It's keeping you fit. You're doing your ultra running to help you stay fit.
Yeah, no, it's been really good. And I do love the ultra running as well. I probably love it just as much as the mountains, to be honest. But the running was something that I got into because it was a way to keep fit and keep that really good cardiovascular fitness for mountaineering. So it works really well just to keep you motivated and keep you on track. And it's just something you always really look forward to. If it's anyone that's got a passion or something that they really love, it's you wake up and you just think, oh, I can't wait to do that again, or can't wait. You don't care about all the hours training spent or whatever. You just can't wait to be back out there.
Very much becomes the driving force. And then for your family, they have the element of, okay, it's a pretty dangerous pastime and they're concerned for your safety, but there's also a good side of what they're experiencing.
Yeah, no, I think they do it so well, my family. They do express their concern, but they never ever hold me back, which I think is important as well, because someone like myself, I'm probably not going to be held back regardless, but I'd like to feel supportive and be able to talk to my family about it and be honest with them. And I think for them, especially since I got diagnosed, it's been really good for them to see that it hasn't held me back in any way, and probably puts their mind at ease, because I guess the first 12 months after diagnosis is pretty scary. And I think almost your family take it harder than you do. And that unknown of what your future looks like is probably almost harder on your parents than what it is on yourself. So I think, yeah, the more that I get out there and do all those kind of things, the more I think they're like, oh, yeah, she's right. She's fine.
It shows your capacity and your resilience as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people would say I'm pretty stubborn and pig-headed when it comes to doing something that I want to do. That's for sure.
I'm sure you're not alone, but I'm also sure that it helped you do the mountaineering.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel like even my last climb in Pakistan, I was having a way better time than a lot of the other people on my team, just because I was so grateful to be up there. I didn't even really think about the hardships, to be fair. I was just so happy to be up there and so glad that my training had got me this far and that I could feel good. And sometimes I think that I feel better up high in altitude on the mountain than what I do in day-to-day life, just dealing with general MS stuff and all of that. So I feel really extra strong up there, which is good. It's a really good feeling.
And what about for the community? What do they get from you being out there mountaineering?
In the sense of community, I do have a few connections with other people in the MS community, particularly. And I think it's nice for a lot of them, other people suffering from MS, to see people doing normal stuff still. And I know that I've spoken with a lot of newly diagnosed people and people that are scared and stuff, and told my story and given them tips on they might just want to run a 5 kilometre park run. But it's nice when you've got someone else with the same condition as you that's pushing limits to pave the way a little bit. I wish I had someone that I could have followed when I first got diagnosed to show me that it wasn't going to be all doom and gloom and horrible. So I think in sense of community, probably more towards the MS community, I think it's always really good to see other people with the same condition just like living their best life or doing what they want to do still.
It gives them hope.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I think, yeah, we all need, no matter our circumstances.
Absolutely. We've heard what it means to Holly that she's able to be a mountaineer. After this break, we'll have a look at how you do it. We've heard from Holly what it takes to be a mountaineer and what it means to her family and the MS community. Now, let's have a look at how you do it. Holly, how would somebody go about becoming a mountaineer like you?
I guess the first thing that I would say if someone wanted to get into mountaineering is find an amazing base camp trek or high altitude trek and see if you like how altitude feels and how living a little bit rough feels. Obviously, very hard in Australia to get an idea of mountaineering and whatnot, and it becomes quite expensive if you have to go overseas all the time. But I feel like a really good gateway is your Everest Base Camp trek or Annapurna Base Camp trek or Kilimanjaro or one of those. They seem to be a brilliant kind of gateway into just getting a feel for the life. And then I feel like it's a bit of a snowball effect from there. It's if you enjoy it, I find that you'll have no problem stepping up into mountaineering and finding a good support group or Facebook. There's quite a few Facebook groups for beginning mountaineering and advice on what to climb, where to climb, and yeah, finding your perfect first climb to see if it is for you. There's so many in Nepal, it's almost hard not to find one there these days.
So there's two real elements that you mentioned there. One's about a base camp type expedition, and then there's a moving on from there into climbing. So if I was going to go and look for a base camp tour or expedition, what would I be looking for if I went online to go and have a search?
Generally, you'd be searching for Nepal high altitude treks. They usually call them treks. And not necessarily, it doesn't just have to be Nepal, but I would probably advise Nepal is your best bet and safest bet for anyone wanting to start out because they have so many treks in Nepal where they do go up over 5,000 meters, which is where you do need to see if you're going to be comfortable up there because 5,000 meters is usually just your base camp height when you're doing high altitude mountaineering. So, yeah, and there's so many companies now that a lot of them are really quite regulated and it just really depends on what you want to spend. I feel like if you want to be a mountaineer, you probably want to do it a bit rougher than the comfort base camp treks that they organise these days because there is no kind of bougie high altitude mountaineering. You're gonna be in a tent and you're gonna be on a glacier and you're gonna be in the elements and it's gonna be cold and you're gonna be boiling your own snow for drinking water and eating bare minimum. So I think sometimes, yeah, probably going for not the most comfortable option for your first kind of big trek would be your best bet to see if it was for you.
And would I need to get any gear or equipment before I go?
Yeah, I think the best bit of kit that you can take over there would be warm clothing that would be suitable for the temperature that you're set to experience depending on what height you're going for. Base camp, you'd find that you'd need a really good down jacket, lots of thermal layers, Gore-Tex rain pants and jacket, and obviously a really good set of hiking boots as well. And then generally, you find in countries, particularly like Nepal, because they're so well set up, you can hire a lot of gear, which when you're starting out is quite important because you just don't know. We can't test it out in Australia, and it's very expensive to buy that equipment here. So it's almost better to go over and hire it, get a bit of a feel for it, and then once you fall in love maybe with a particular bit of kit, then you can actually purchase it. But it's a bit dangerous in Australia to purchase kit without any prior experience because it's very expensive and usually we can't return it because we're getting it from overseas.
There's definitely, you need to have a little bit of knowledge before you start investing.
Yeah, definitely, because the most expensive thing can really be your kit in some of the smaller level climbs. The climb itself might not be that expensive to get into. If you're going to do a mountain like Island Peak or Lubbock or Mera Peak, but the kit is quite expensive, and getting the wrong kit can still mean that you might end up with hypothermia or losing fingers or toes up in the cold. So you really do need to make sure that you've got really warm equipment, and yeah, what's recommended by people that are actually doing that particular climb is quite important too, because every climb is different in regards to what kit you need.
And I gather if you're joining a trek, then they'll also give you an idea of what you need to bring along.
Yeah, a lot of the trekking companies are really pretty proactive in giving you gear lists and what you need to take. They're also really good at organising to take you to find that gear in Kathmandu. They'll quite often have a day there before you leave for your trek to make sure that you've got everything, because there's just amazing mountaineering shopping there. It's like being in Bali and needing a surfboard. It's exactly the same. So there's a lot of stuff there. I feel a lot of the companies that you deal with are pretty proactive at setting you up. You usually have a person to talk to and discuss gear and needs and all of that. So I feel like most people are pretty well informed once they make that decision of who they're going to travel with.
So that'll answer a lot of questions at the time you're ready to book. Holly, we've talked quite a bit about your mountaineering experience, but for you, what's next in this space?
At the moment, I'm in a bit of a planning phase for my next climb. And given the climbs that I've been doing and how well I think I've tolerated them and come through them, I have been looking to go for an 8,000 meter peak. So the one that I have chosen for the moment is Manaslu, which is in Nepal. It's a mountain that I have been drawn to for a very long time. It will probably be a good 5-week expedition. But yeah, it looks like a great opportunity to get my foot in the door of climbing a 8,000er and using oxygen and pushing the next level.
So that's a part of your never ending push forwards in what you can do. That's a very amazing challenge by the sound of it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking very forward to it. And I thought the best place to climb your first 8,000er would have to be Nepal for safety reasons, even though I'm quite drawn to going back to Pakistan. I think Manaslu sounds like a really good first 8,000 opportunity in a very knowledgeable and slightly safer environment.
Because, of course, you can only do the administratively safer environment. You can't control the weather and apart from choosing the time of year.
Yeah, and I think that the mountains probably, I never really believed in things like climate change and stuff much before, but the mountains are something that show how stressed our climate is. And I think we've always had mountaineering seasons where it's safe to climb. However, these seasons aren't the same anymore. And the dangers on the mountains are a lot higher because the weather is just so unpredictable and different up there, with the biggest thing being global warming is melting the glaciers, which is opening crevasses and just creating a lot of dangers up there. So yeah, there's some things you can plan for, but I think that there's a lot of things getting thrown our way now in regards to that we can't control. So you just got to put yourself in the best circumstance that you can.
Absolutely. Forest.chat listeners wish you all the best in your future endeavour there, Holly. That sounds an amazing thing to be going to do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we're talking with Holly Taylor about being a mountaineer. Remember, there are 4 ways to get involved with Forest.chat. Go to Forest.chat to subscribe to the email list where you receive notifications of upcoming episodes. Listen to the episodes at forest.chat/episodes. If you do something interesting, book an interview at forest.chat/interview. If you want to support a small business, go to forest.chat/advert and book an advert. I'm looking forward to joining you with our next guest. Until next time, enjoy making it happen.